So I'm personally torn on Franklin Pierce. Uh, Franklin Pierce was the 14th president of the United States of America. He was president March 4th, 1853 to March 4th, 1857. Um, Basically, when he enters office, he's loved by everyone, but by the time he leaves office, he's hated by everybody. Like, just straight up, everyone hates him. People legitimately thought that he was mentally unstable, but that's because his son, Benny, 11 years old, in 1853, just weeks before he becomes president, is run over by a train. He, yeah. Um, so I'm not sure how I feel. Like, should I hate Pierce for the things that he let happen or the things that he did, or should I feel bad for the guy because I mean he basically devolved into a rage of alcoholism and just pain over his son dying. So you decide. So Franklin Pierce, nicknamed Young Hickory, was the 14th president of the United States. He is mostly remembered for having failed to deal effectively with the corroding sectional controversy over slavery in the decade preceding the American Civil War. Which president is most to blame for the American Civil War? Many historians say it's Franklin Pierce. At the time of his election, Pierce was age 47, and he, at the time, was the youngest man to have ever been elected to the presidency. Representing the eastern element of the Democratic Party, which was inclined, for the sake of harmony and business prosperity, to oppose anti slavery agitation and to generally placate Southern opinion. Basically, make the South happy. Pierce tried to promote sectional unity by filling his cabinet with extremists from both sides of the slavery debate, basically thinking that if I have the loudest and most obnoxious voices from both sides of the argument in the same room together, if I can get those guys to agree, we got this. Problem was, is none of them agreed ever. He also attempted to sidestep the fierce sectional antagonisms of the domestic scene, home in the U.S., by ambitiously and aggressively promoting the extension of U.S. territorial and commercial interests abroad. He tried to disguise problems at home by making big flashy things happen across the world. To distract people from the slavery argument, he tried to buy Cuba and barely avoided war for it. He also recognized a very weak claim of a former American dictator in Nicaragua, South America. Among Pierce's domestic policies were preparations for a transcontinental railroad and the opening of the Northwest for settlement. In 1853, in order to create a southerly route to California, the U.S. Minister to Mexico, James Gadsden, negotiated the purchase of almost 30,000 square miles of Mexican territory, that's the Gadsden Purchase, for $10 million, mainly to stimulate migration to the Northwest and to facilitate the construction of a central route to the Pacific. Pierce signed the Kansas Nebraska Act in 1854. Just a second. So, Kansas Nebraska Act of 1854. It was sponsored in Congress by Douglas. Uh, and it was meant to repeal the Missouri Compromise of 1820, which, if you remember, banned slavery above the southern border of Missouri. The intent of the Kansas Nebraska Act was to let new states of Kansas decide for themselves, slavery. Like, let the people decide, let the people vote. Douglas swore to make Pierce's life a living heck, as if it wasn't already, after, watching his, because he saw it happen, 11-year-old son get run over by a train. Douglas swore that he would make sure that Pierce's life was miserable if he didn't back the bill. This is what Pierce really fails at. Pierce caved to the bullying. I mean, to an extent, it's understandable, but he was bullied and he fell into it and he allowed it. And this is why historians, a lot of them, put the blame for the American Civil War on his shoulders, because Pierce caved to the bullying. And the anti-slavery faction was very angry about this, especially Abraham Lincoln, and this is a huge motivation for him to form the Republican Party in response. And it also directly leads, in the short-term consequence, to Bleeding Kansas, which, if you remember, were a series of border wars. And John Brown leads raids. It's pro-slavery forces fighting violently against the free staters. So, Franklin Pierce, not the greatest president. So, the Kansas Nebraska Act of 1854. This measure, which opened up 2 new territories for settlement, included the repeal of Missouri Compromise of 1820, by which the slave territories were prohibited from moving north of latitude 3630, and it provided the status of the territories as free or slave that would be decided by popular sovereignty. Let the people decide. Let the people vote. The indignation aroused by the act and the resulting period of violent conflict in the Kansas Territory were the main causes of the rise of the Republican Party in the mid-1850s. Owing to his ineptness in handling the situation in Kansas, Pierce was denied renomination by the Democrats, and he remains the only president to be so repudiated by his party. Shortly before he was inaugurated as president, he witnessed his son run over by a train. Pierce never really recovered from this tragedy. He had always been a heavy drinker, and Pierce descended further into apparent alcoholism, and he died in obscurity. When he died, he was basically a nobody again. Franklin Pierce, a tragedy. A tragedy emotionally, tragedy as a president, and his personal tragedies become national tragedies, and they are multiplied as the 1850s move on towards the American Civil War. I hope you're learning, and I hope you aren't that bummed out.